Brilliant. Well, a couple of days ago, I was talking with my son, Reuben, and we were both discussing how exhausting it has been keeping up with all the developments in Ukraine and all that's been going on and thinking through some of the massive implications of all that is going on there. And I expect, like you, like me, we've all been kind of glued to our screens, watching in horror as events unfold. And for all this to be happening in an ordinary country where many of us visited not too long ago from this church and made friends there and saw that these are ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. It's just too much to get our heads round at times. And all this straight after 2 years of a global pandemic where we were grappling with so much new information and thinking through world implications. And we were even learning about new vocabulary like new variants and vaccine rollouts and COVID risk assessments. All these things that came in and kind of crowded our thinking. And my son's 20 and he still has a plastic brain. He is still able to learn, and he admitted that he was feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by all that was going on. So I was quite relieved. It's not just me. Is it just me, or are we all pretty exhausted about looking at what's happening around the world? It's exhausting, it's tiring. But the accelerating pace of change and information overload has been well known since the 1980s, actually. Buckminster Fuller, who is the architect who invented the geodesic dome, the one that we all kind of go in our tents now, and he kind of created the buckyball and things, learned all about carbon structures. He became a systems theorist. And in 1981, he wrote a book called The Critical Path. And he came up with what he called the knowledge doubling curve. And he estimated that if you could measure the cumulative knowledge of human civilization from the year of Jesus' birth, it took around 1,500 years for it to double. But from there, it doubled again by 1750 as the Enlightenment, the Reformation took hold. And then from there, it again doubled around every 100 years up until World War II. But after the war, it accelerated again and doubled probably every 25 years. And until the 1980s, he suggested it was around 1 to 2 years for it to double. Now, if you just think 20 years ago, we were amazed if we could send and receive still pictures, just stills. And now we see events unfolding in real time by video. And it is incredible. The news from Ukraine is now live. Updates are posted. There are a ton of different perspectives. Everything is happening live. If you look at the BBC app, it's kind of the live page, which is always scrolling up with the next event. It kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking, oh no, what's happening now? There's so much going on. And we kind of have come to the realization there is far too much even out there for us to understand the big picture. We cannot get our heads around everything. We have this concept that we don't know the full picture and the truth. It is overwhelming. Some current estimates suggest that our stored knowledge as humanity may soon double in a matter of days or in a matter of hours. That is incredible, isn't it? And yet, while we have had more information than ever before, we don't actually seem to be that much happier or living more peacefully, do we? In fact, even before the pandemic or the invasion, many of us were feeling still more anxious or scattered or distracted than we were a few decades ago. And in her book, The Village Effect, Why Face-to-Face Contact Matters, Dr. Susan Pinker reports that despite our increasing digital connectivity, more and more people are tending to feel isolated and lonely. It's harder than ever to focus on one person at a time or one thing at a time because we're conditioned towards multitasking. I don't know if you're the same. You can't just do one thing at a time. You've just got to try and do as many things as possible at the same time. we're always thinking, how can I beat the queues? What's that driver doing, cutting me up? I should be first. Things like that. Well, Dallas Willard, who is a philosopher and teacher from the University of California, he was a writer on the subject of spiritual formation. And John Ortberg asked Dallas Willard once to suggest the one thing he should do to invigorate his spiritual life. And Ortberg says that Willard's reply was shocking in its simplicity. He looked him in the eye and said, "You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. For hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our world today." And John Mark Comer took that phrase, the ruthless elimination of hurry, as the title of the book that we're going to be following for Lent, leading up to Easter. Because whilst you think there are many, many more concerns that are challenging our faith and our spiritual life today, living in the information age means that as modern society gets faster and faster and there is more coming in, there's more information all the time and more challenges globally, we are actually losing the skills and ability to be able to pause and center ourselves on the one who knows all the answers, the one who knows the end from the beginning. We've lost the ability to stop and draw strength from Christ. We've lost the ability to understand that actually even 2,000 years ago, during this time and Passion, the first Easter Holy Week, actually history changed forever then. And that actually we just need to focus on the one who knows the end from the beginning. Carl Jung, the psychologist who coined the terms introvert and extrovert, things like that, to develop much of the theory behind the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, he said, hurry is not of the devil, hurry is the devil. Hurry is the devil. And Corrie ten Boom, who was herself interned in a concentration camp during World War II and knows all about the horrors of war, still said, if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. And she felt that both sin and busyness have the same effect. They cut us off from our connection with God, to other people, even to our own soul. And I think many people exhibit the symptoms of what psychologists call hurry sickness, which leads to that kind of fear of missing out or irritability and frustration when delays occur, leading ultimately to burnout or higher risk of heart disease and things that we find today. You just have to see when you look around it. If you just ask people, how are you doing these days, many people will say, I'm fine, thanks. Bit busy. That is probably the response that many people give back. The thing is that Jesus was a busy man. He had so many responsibilities. He had so many people that were clamoring for his attention and time. And yet somehow he managed to live a balanced life, didn't he? He managed to give people his wholehearted attention, and yet he was able also to withdraw. He managed to keep a good rhythm to his life, which meant he ultimately achieved salvation for all of us and left us all the teaching we ever need. It's incredible. But conversely, pathological busyness describes somebody who has too much to do in too little time, such that their relationships suffer. And we have to speed up to cram everything in, even our interactions with God. And John Mark Comer, in this book, which I recommend, I'll get it. He suggests that if we speed up too much, the pace of our life can actually become incompatible with love. Incompatible with love. And instead, he suggests that we need to reflect on another book that he recommends by Japanese theologian Kosuke Koyama, who's written a book called The 3 Mile an Hour God. 3 miles an hour is walking pace. Although I think it's 4 miles an hour for posties, isn't it? But anyway, 3 miles an hour for the rest of us. Walking with Jesus at such a pace that we can actually listen and meaningfully interact with him, learn from him, listen to him. Because after all, he is the one with all the answers we are seeking. And he knows us better than we know ourselves. So perhaps he's the one we should be spending time with. The thing is that although life is hectic, isn't it? Generations of Christians down the centuries have faced those same decisions about the best way we should spend our time or prioritize. To simply blame technology or the culture we're living or the circumstances of all the difficulties that are going on is to actually avoid some of the deeper issues of where we might prioritize, what our identity is, who we turn to when we're looking for answers. Those things which steer our decision making. And so we read this lovely story in Luke chapter 10 that Norman read out for us. And I love this story because you can so easily see it happening in your own house, in your own kitchen, or in your own lounge. So there's Martha. She's there, she's making supper, she's getting stressed. And there's her sister who's sat in the lounge with Jesus, just having a nice time, sat listening to all he's saying. And Martha's there preparing the tea, thinking, what? I've got to do all this work while she's just sitting around. What is going on? I'm like Martha. I don't know if you're like Martha, I'm like Martha. There's too much to do, too little time, and all these people who can just sit around, goodness me, what are they playing at? Who else is going to make the tea? If I don't do it, then, nobody else is going to do it. And then people will just get crotchety because there's no refreshments. Have you ever had those sort of thoughts? Or was that just me? I think Luke included this story about Mary and Martha because he knows what we're like. And he's there. He wanted to demonstrate that there's a tension between serving and intimacy with God and taking time out to get to know God better. And both things are good. It is good to serve others. It is good to provide hospitality. Hospitality is a spiritual gift. It's something that you can make people feel welcome in your home. And we love to do hospitality here. She opens up her home to Jesus. Brilliant. Full marks. But then Martha just finds herself, her attitude starts to shift. Instead of delighting in being able to serve, she suddenly lets herself get stressed and start blaming other people and blaming others for what's going on. And this is the pickle. When what we do for God starts to hinder us from being with God, then we can go downhill in our spiritual lives. And notice that Martha doesn't simply go and ask Mary for help. She could have gone and had a quiet word. She could have said, Mary, I am doing a little bit of making the tea. Can you give us a hand? No, what she does, she moans to Jesus on the side. She goes straight to Jesus and she says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. That's the prayer of the stressed. Just going straight to, Lord, it's all their problem. Can you make them help me? Can you sort me out? It's the prayer of the stressed. And notice she actually starts telling Jesus what to do. Tell her to come and help me. How often do our prayers start turning into, telling God what to do? Actually, it'd be a good idea, Lord, if you sorted this out, you sort that out. Why don't you sort a no-fly zone? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? We start telling the Lord what to do, when actually, perhaps we'd be better off listening to what he wants us to do. Maybe that's what Mary was doing. How often are we just too busy to take that time to listen? And Jesus is so kind to Martha. You can just hear it. I think he's kind of laughing, chuckling as he says her name. Martha, Martha, chill out. Chill out. He says lovingly, look, you're worried and you're upset about so many things. And that word for upset is from this Greek word throbzo or something, which comes from a root word which means crowd. It's like you got too much crowding in your head. Now, who's like me? You get a bit crowded in the head sometimes. I am like that. We all get a bit crowded sometimes. Too many tasks. Mental overcrowding. In April last year, the HuffPost, an awesome source of reliable information, I'm sure, published an article, and they called it the 6 signs of hurry sickness. I wonder how many you suffer from, and I'm going to be guilty on most of these. Number one, you treat everything like a race. So if you see 2 queues of traffic, do you just like, right, I'm gonna, or at the queue at the checkout, I'll go to that one. How often do you find yourself multitasking? How many people have a house, you double screen? That is shocking. In our house, there's double screening going on. Triple screening sometimes, I have seen it. And I'm like, stop double screening. Watch the telly or your phone, not both at this. Anyway. Delays really irritate you. Get your goat. When you're delayed, you start getting, the heart rate goes up. That's number 3. Number 4, you feel like you're forgetting to do something. You think, I'm sure there was something I had to do. I can't remember what it was. Oh dear, that's number 4. Number 5, you interrupt people. Knock, knock. Interrupting sheep. Bah. Got it. Okay. Right. Number 6. You take too much pleasure in ticking off your to-do list. Or in my case, you've actually been guilty of writing something in just so you can scrub it out. Guilt. Terrible. But Jesus says the answer is obvious. He says that only a few things are needed. Actually, he dials it down, doesn't it? Only a few things are needed, or perhaps even just one. That is the point. One thing at a time, or just a few things at a time. And that is the choice that we have to make. Get rid of the crowded mess of our minds and focus on just one thing. Mary was choosing to do that one thing. She was sat at the feet of Jesus, getting her priorities right. Now, of course, I am an activist, and I've been laughing at myself preparing this talk. I am guilty as charged, and always the best preachers are to yourself first. And this is true. I'm a hypocrite when it comes to keeping a God-focused mind. I don't know if have you ever experienced that thing when you stop scrolling, your eyes are still turning around? Anyway, but I know that only one thing is needed. Only one thing is needed. And those days where I start off focusing on God and his word as my priority, those are the better days. Those are the better days. When we focus on God first and put him as number one in our life. And sometimes I find my mind is so muddled or hyperlinked that actually one of the things I have to do is actually to write out some scripture. It's a way of focusing the mind. It's a way of focusing our mind on God. And he helps me steady my mind into prayer mode. If I can't get into prayer mode, sometimes the discipline is to write out the Lord's Prayer that we said today, one line at a time, and just dwell on each line, because it means more than just the words. It really does help. So if you are a scatterbrain like me, then don't panic. If you are overwhelmed by the news and all the flood of information that we're supposed to know, then just be at peace, because God knows you and he loves you. And I think this Lent series, we're calling it Unhurried, but based on this book, is for you. And I pray that over this time leading up to Easter, we'll be able to find a way to kind of funnel down from the many, many things down to perhaps just a few, or maybe even the one thing that the Lord wants us to concentrate on, focusing upon him. So I think let's be able to take some time out to be still over these next weeks. And just remember that it turned out well for Martha. She is a total hero in the Bible. She was the busy one who kind of got told off, but at the same time, she's a hero. In John's Gospel, it's recorded that Mary and Martha were both present at one of the pivotal moments of Jesus' ministry. Lazarus was the first person to be raised from the dead by Jesus, and it went viral. Lazarus was the brother of Mary and Martha, and they saw their brother raised from the dead. I mean, how incredible is that? They saw the awesome power of God displayed. But more than that, it says explicitly in the text, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. You know, you always think that Mary's the super spiritual giant, but actually, in John's Gospel, she only gets a little mention. I'm with the Martha, the scatterbrain and the activist. But actually, Jesus loved Martha too. He loved Mary. He knows what we're like. He knows how we're made. He knows what we struggle with. And so, in spite of our lack of faith and our imbalanced lives, Jesus comes to us and says, listen. You're worried, you're upset by many things, but only few things. Indeed, only one thing is needed. Amen. Shall we stand together?